He came home at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, which was the first strange thing. Corbin Hale never came home before 7. Vivienne Hale heard the front door open from the kitchen, where she was standing with her back to the hallway, one hand resting on the counter, the other holding a glass of water she hadn't drunk yet. She heard 2 sets of footsteps. She set the glass down slowly. The woman who walked into the kitchen behind Corbin was perhaps 32-33. She wore a charcoal blazer and carried a leather tote over one shoulder. Her hair was loose. She looked at the kitchen the way people look at hotel lobbies, taking it in without really seeing it, comfortable in a way that told Vivienne everything before a single word was spoken. Corbin's face did the thing it always did when he was trying to manage a situation. It went very still, very controlled. "Vivienne," he said. "I didn't think you'd be home." She stood in her own kitchen, in the house she had chosen, furnished and spent 14 years making livable, and her husband told her he had not thought she would be home. She looked at the woman. The woman looked at the floor. Vivienne set her water glass in the sink. She dried her hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle, and then she walked upstairs. She did not slam the door, she did not call anyone. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall for perhaps 2 minutes. Then she pulled her overnight bag from the top shelf of the closet and began to pack. Corbin appeared in the doorway 6 minutes later. She knew because she had been counting without meaning to. He had taken time to say something to the woman downstairs first, which told her something she filed away quietly. "It's not what it looks like," he said. Vivienne folded a cashmere sweater and placed it in the bag. The gray one. She had bought it herself with money she had made herself, though Corbin had a habit of describing it as our money in conversations with other people. "She's a colleague," he said. "A consultant on the Meridian project. We came back here because the office was..." "Corbin." Her voice was even. Not cold, just even. "I'm not asking." He stepped into the room. "You're not even going to let me explain?" She opened the top drawer and took out the things she needed. A phone charger, her passport, the small envelope of documents she had moved to that drawer 8 months ago, when she had first started paying close attention to the things she had long chosen not to examine. Corbin watched the envelope. His face changed. "Where did you get that?" Vivienne tucked it into the front pocket of the bag. She zipped the pocket shut. "Vivienne." She looked at him then. Really looked at him. She had loved this man for 16 years. Married him at 31 in a small ceremonies outside Halifax with 40 guests and a borrowed string quartet. She had believed with everything she had that they were building something together. The believing had taken a long time to stop. It had not stopped all at once. "I'm not leaving because of her," she said. Corbin's jaw tightened. "Then why are you?" "I'm leaving because of every meeting where you spoke over me and then repeated what I said. Because of every dinner with your partners where I sat beside you and you introduced me by describing what I did for the house. Because of the night you told Graham I was good at the soft side of things." She paused. "Because of the fact that you believe that." He opened his mouth. She picked up the bag. "I have somewhere to be," she said. She walked past him. At the top of the stairs she paused for a moment, not because she was uncertain, but because the house was quiet and she wanted to hear it one last time. The old radiator ticking in the hallway, the sound of the city through the windows, the particular silence of a beautiful house that had stopped feeling like a home somewhere along the way. She walked down the stairs. The woman in the charcoal blazer was standing near the front window with her coat on, her bag pressed to her side. She stepped back when Vivienne came into the front hallway. Vivienne did not look at her with contempt. She felt none. This had not been a battle between 2 women. This had been a marriage one man had been quietly dismantling for years before he ever invited anyone else into it. Vivienne opened the front door. Corbin came to the top of the stairs. "Where are you going?" She stepped outside. October air, sharp and clean, came into the hallway. "I don't know yet," she said, and then she closed the door behind her. She had met Corbin Hale on a Tuesday evening in October 15 years earlier, at a fundraiser for an arts foundation in downtown Toronto. She had been 29. She was there representing the firm where she had been working for 3 years, as a junior financial analyst, the kind of job where you proved yourself in increments and waited for people above you to notice. Corbin was already someone by then, not famous, not yet, but the kind of man who entered a room and had it reorganize around him. He was 40 or nearly, with a particular confidence that came not from arrogance but from having been right often enough to trust himself. He was in the middle of raising the second round of funding for Hale Meridian, a real estate development firm he had started at 34, with 2 partners, and a vision that most people in that room still did not fully understand. They ended up beside each other at the bar, talking about a painting on the far wall that neither of them liked. "The composition is trying too hard," Vivienne said. Corbin looked at her with something like surprise. Not because she had said it, but because she was right. The artist does that. It's the same problem in his other work. He doesn't trust the quiet. She had not expected that from a man in a $2,000 jacket who had spent the first hour of the evening being congratulated by everyone in the room. They talked for an hour. Then 2. She told him about her work in terms she rarely used in professional settings, honestly with the gaps included. She told him about the model she had built for a risk analysis that her manager had submitted under his own name without mentioning her. She told him how she had found out and said nothing, because she did not yet know what to do with that kind of quiet wrong. Corbin listened in a way that felt unfamiliar, not patient the way people are patient when they are waiting for their turn to speak, actually listening. When she finished, he looked at her for a moment. That analysis, he said, the one your manager submitted. What was the core argument? She told. He was quiet for a second. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need on the Meridian expansion. We've been trying to get someone to see it that way for months. She had thought he was being polite. He had not been. 3 weeks later, he offered her a consulting contract. She took it carefully, with a separate agreement and a clear scope of work, because she was 29, and she had already learned what it cost to give things away without being careful about terms. 6 months after that, they had dinner. Just the two of them, at a small Italian place near King Street. He told her he had been thinking about her since October. She told him the same. A year and a half later they married. And for a while, for several years actually, she had believed they were the kind of marriage that had started from the right place. Built on something real. On recognition. She had not understood then how slowly recognition can be withdrawn. The Hale Meridian offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower near Bay Street. Corbin's name was on the letterhead. His photograph was on the firm's website above words like visionary and cornerstone of Toronto's development landscape. There were profiles in financial magazines and a speaking invitation every other month from some conference or another. Vivienne's name appeared nowhere on the letterhead. This had not always felt like a problem. In the early years she had been the one who insisted on it actually. She had her own clients, her own work, her own professional identity. She did not want blurred by proximity to his. She had built a boutique advisory practice out of a back bedroom in their first house on Palmerston, taking on clients carefully, doing the kind of work that did not require her to be loud about it. But somewhere around the 6th or 7th year of their marriage, something shifted in how Corbin spoke about her work. It became smaller in his language, not in one dramatic moment. In the way water changes stone. Slowly, repeatedly, without ever calling attention to itself. There was the dinner with his partners, where he mentioned she did some consulting on the side. On the side. She had been awake at 2 in the morning 3 days earlier, reviewing a structural risk model for a mixed-use development in Vancouver. On the side. There was the afternoon his mother, Patricia Hale, visited and asked about Vivienne's work, and Corbin answered before she could. She keeps busy, he said with a smile that was meant to be fond. She has her little projects. Patricia had glanced at Vivienne with something careful in her expression. Vivienne had smiled back. She had become very good at smiling. There was the evening at the Meridian Anniversary Gala when one of Corbin's investors, a man named Douglas Pemberton, turned to Vivienne and asked what she thought about the proposed East End corridor acquisition. Corbin answered for her. I keep her away from the shop talk, he said laughing. She's too honest, she'd talk me out of everything. Everyone at the table laughed. Vivienne picked up her wine glass and said nothing. Later that night in the car going home, Corbin reached over and squeezed her hand. You were great tonight. People love you. I didn't say anything, she said. He glanced at her. What? Tonight. I didn't say anything. You answered every question directed at me. Corbin looked ahead at the road. I was just keeping things moving. You know how those dinners go. I know exactly how they go, she said. He did not ask what she meant. That was its own kind of answer. The acquisition Douglas Pemberton had been asking about, the East End Corridor project, came back to Vivienne 3 weeks later, in the form of a call from a development firm that was considering the same site from the other side. They had heard about her work through a colleague. They wanted a risk assessment on the deal's environmental liabilities, specifically around legacy contamination clauses that the city was known to enforce unpredictably. Vivienne took the contract. She spent 8 days on the analysis. She pulled historical data, municipal compliance records, comparable remediation cases from the past decade. She built a model that mapped the liability exposure under 4 different regulatory scenarios. It was, even by her own standards, some of the most careful work she had done. The firm used her analysis to restructure their offer. They closed the deal at a price Corbin's firm had considered too risky to bid on. Vivienne submitted her invoice. She deposited the fee in the account she had opened in her own name 4 years earlier, which Corbin did not know about. Not because she had hidden it, but because he had never asked about her finances in a way that suggested he believed they mattered. She had not planned any of this as a response to anything. She had simply, over the course of several years, stopped making her work smaller to fit comfortably beside his. By the 10th year of their marriage, the house on Forest Hill Road was large and quiet, in the way that expensive houses get when the people inside them have stopped talking about the things that matter. Corbin worked late most evenings. His phone was always face up on the table, always lighting up, always requiring his attention before she finished a sentence. She tried, for longer than she should have. There was the Saturday in March when she made breakfast. Actual breakfast, eggs and fruit and the sourdough he used to love, and set it on the table while he stood in the kitchen answering emails on his phone. She watched him eat half of it without looking up. When she cleared the plates he said, "That was good. Thank you, as though she were staff. There was the night she tried to tell him about the Vancouver deal, the one that had come in at close to $400,000 above his firm's last offer. Partly because of her liability model, she had been careful about how she brought it up, not wanting to make it competitive between them, just wanting to share something she was proud of. Corbin listened for perhaps 90 seconds. Then his phone lit up. He glanced at it. "Sorry, I need to take this." He stood up from the dinner table, pressing the phone to his ear, walking toward the study. Vivienne sat alone at the table for a few minutes. Then she got up and washed the dishes. She did not stop loving him immediately. That would have been cleaner. Instead, it happened the way her trust in him had eroded. Not a single break, but an accumulation of small ones. A dinner where he described her to a new client as his partner in the non-professional sense, with a small laugh that invited the client to share in the joke of it. A weekend trip to Montreal where he spent 3 hours on a call while she walked alone along the canal in November cold, and did not feel lonely exactly, just accurate. A night when they lay in the same bed in the dark and she realized she had stopped hoping he would ask about her day. She did not tell him any of this. She had learned by then that telling him things created a particular kind of conversation, in which he accepted the information, expressed something appropriate, and then everything continued as before. It was not malice, that had taken her a long time to understand. It was not cruelty. It was something closer to the conviction that the life he was living was the real life and everything beside it, including her, was support structure. You do not argue with that kind of conviction. You either live inside it or you leave. Vivienne had been deciding slowly for 2 years. The woman in the charcoal blazer was named Renata Coles. Vivienne found this out not by asking Corbin, but because she had been paying attention for long enough to know how to find things out quietly. Renata Coles was a consultant. She was 33. She had been working with Hale Meridian on the Atlantic expansion since late spring. Vivienne knew this because she had looked at the project team list, in a document that had been left open on the shared home printer in November, and she had read it the way she read everything now. Carefully, without assumption, filing the facts somewhere cool and separate from her feelings. She had not confronted Corbin. There was nothing to confront yet, and besides, she did not need confirmation the way she once might have. She did not need him to admit it to make it real. She had watched the shape of his days change, the late calls, the new cologne she had not chosen and he had not mentioned, the way he had started trimming his beard differently and bought new running shoes, the way Renata Coles's name appeared in his phone notifications with a frequency that had nothing to do with the Atlantic expansion. She watched all of this the way she watched markets, without panic, with patience, with the understanding that information gathered calmly is always more useful than information extracted in crisis. She booked an appointment with a lawyer in February. Not a divorce lawyer, not yet. Just a lawyer who could explain to her, clearly and without drama, what she was entitled to and what she had to protect. She updated the registrations on her practice accounts in March. In April she moved certain documents. And all the while she had breakfast across from Corbin in the mornings, and drove to her office and did her work, and came home and cooked or ordered in, and sat at the other end of the long dining table they had bought in Zurich on their 10th anniversary, the one that could seat 12 and somehow made every meal feel like a meeting. She had stayed for a while, because leaving requires certainty, and certainty takes time to build. But by the afternoon Corbin came home at 4:30 with Renata Coles at his shoulder. Vivienne had been certain for months. She simply had not yet found the precise moment. He had given it to her. The morning after she left, Vivienne sat in the small suite she had booked at a hotel on Wellington Street and drank coffee by the window. The city was doing what it always did. Gray October light across the buildings. People on the street below with their chins tucked against the wind. She did not cry. She had done the crying privately, months ago in the car on the way back from a client meeting in Mississauga, where she had sat in a parking garage for 20 minutes, before she trusted herself to drive. That crying had been about grief. This morning was different, quieter, almost like relief. Her phone had 17 missed calls from Corbin. She did not call back. She sent a short message to her assistant to reschedule her morning and then opened her laptop and worked for 3 hours. Corbin called her lawyer by noon. Her lawyer called Vivienne at 12:30. He wants to talk. He can talk to you, Vivienne said. He says it's not what you think. She was quiet for a second. Please tell him that I'm not in the business of thinking anything. I'm in the business of knowing. Her lawyer, who had been doing this for 22 years and had a particular gift for not reacting, paused just slightly before saying, I'll pass that along. Corbin came to the hotel that evening. She had expected him to find it. He knew her habits, knew she would choose somewhere quiet near the financial core, somewhere she could walk to meetings if she needed to. She came down to the lobby because she was not going to have this conversation in her room. He looked terrible. She noticed this without satisfaction. They sat in 2 chairs near the window. He had brought nothing, no flowers, no letter, no gesture. She had not expected any, but their absence told her something about what kind of conversation he thought this was going to be. "Tell me what I can do," he said. Vivienne looked at him. "There's nothing to do, Corbin. Don't say that. Why not?" He leaned forward. His hands were clasped between his knees. "Because I love you. Because I made a mistake and I know that and I need you to let me." "It was not a mistake," she said. "You don't bring someone to a home by mistake. You make a choice. Small choices every day for a long time until one of them is visible enough that the person standing in your kitchen can't pretend she didn't see it." He was quiet. "I've been that person," she said, pretending. "For a long time. Not because I'm weak. Because I loved you and I was trying to find a way to stay." He reached for her hand. She let him take it, but she did not hold it back. "I can change," he said. She looked down at his hand over hers. She thought about the kitchen floor in their first apartment in Cabbitown. The one above the dry cleaner with the windows that rattled in winter. She thought about the way he used to look at her across a table when she was explaining something she had figured out. The particular quality of his attention back then. Hungry and specific, the look of a man who understood what he was lucky to have. She thought about the gala last spring, where he had laughed her out of a conversation about the corridor acquisition. About the dinner where he had called her his partner in the non-professional sense. About the morning she had eaten alone at the Zurich table and realized she had not told him about a major deal she was proud of, because she already knew how he would hear it. "I believe you," she said. His face opened. "I believe you could change," she said, "but I don't have to wait here while you do." He stared at her. "Corbin," her voice was gentle, she meant it to be. "You've spent 6 years not seeing me, and the version of me you're trying to hold on to right now, the one standing at the kitchen counter, the one beside you at your events, the one you said goodbye to every morning without asking what she was going to. That woman has been gone for longer than you know." He shook his head. "That's not true." "It is. I just stopped announcing it." He let go of her hand. He sat back in his chair. He looked out the window at the city, and for a moment his face was so naked with something regret. Or the beginning of understanding. She couldn't tell which. That she felt the ache of it in her chest, the specific grief of still caring about someone you are not going to stay with. "Is there anything?" he said finally. "Any chance?" She thought of all the evenings she had sat at the long table waiting for him to ask. All the projects she had stopped describing. All the times she had thought, "Tomorrow I'll try again," and then tomorrow came and she had not been able to make herself try. There were many chances, she said. "We used them." 3 months later, a legal document arrived at Corbin's office. Not a divorce filing that would come later. This was a notice of existing professional interests, filed through Vivienne's lawyer, outlining the scope of her independent advisory practice, the client list, the revenue, the professional distinctions earned under her own name. Corbin's assistant brought it in on a Tuesday morning. Corbin read it at his desk with the door closed. The practice was called Voss Advisory Group. He did not know this. He had never known the name, had never asked, had assumed, if he had thought about it at all, that her work was something modest and personal, a few clients here and there, a professional identity she maintained out of some need for independence that he had privately considered a quirk of her personality. Voss Advisory Group had 16 active clients. 4 of them were names Corbin had been trying to get meetings with for years. 2 of them had declined Hale Meridian's overtures in favor of working with an independent advisor whose name he was only reading now for the first time. His independent advisor, his wife. He reached for his phone to call his longtime partner Graham Whitcomb. Graham answered on the second ring. A pause. "Know what?" "About Vivienne's practice, Voss Coss Advisory." A longer pause. "Graham, I've seen the name," Graham said. "A few times. At a conference in Montreal. She presented a session on legacy liability frameworks. The room was full." Corbin said nothing. "I didn't put it together at first," Graham said. "She used her professional name and you'd never mentioned." He stopped. Chose his words. "She was extraordinary, Corbin." The whole room stayed after. People were still talking about it at dinner. Corbin set the document on his desk. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Graham was quiet for a moment. "I thought you knew." He sat alone in the office for a long time after that. The managing partner of a firm with his name on the door, with magazine profiles in the credenza, with speaking invitations stacked on his assistant's desk. He sat there and read through the document page by page. Client names, case summaries. The East End corridor acquisition. He recognized it. Had heard about the deal from Douglas Pemberton, who had praised the risk model on the other side as the clearest piece of liability analysis he'd seen in years. He had not asked who had done it. He had not thought to ask. Somewhere in the city, Vivienne was at her desk. He knew because she kept regular hours, had always kept regular hours. Something he had registered without understanding it meant she took her work as seriously as he took his. She was probably on a call, probably reading a document with the kind of focus she used to bring to the papers. spread across the tiny table in Cabigtown, the ones he had trusted her to see clearly when everything felt impossible. He remembered one night in particular. He had been certain they were finished. His biggest early investor had pulled out. 2 of his contractors had raised concerns. His second partner was threatening to exit the deal. He had come home and sat at that table and said out loud, for the first time, the words, "I don't know if this works." Vivienne had not said, "Of course it works." She had said, "Show me the numbers." They had sat there until 2 in the morning. She had found 3 pressure points he had not been tracking and built a mitigation strategy from them. By morning the plan was coherent. By the following week it had worked. He had called it instinct in the profile he did the next year. He had said, "I learned early to trust my instincts over the consensus." The journalist had nodded and written it down. Vivienne had read the profile and not said a word. He had taken that silence for approval. He understood now that it had been something else entirely. Vivienne took the meeting because it was on her calendar and she kept her commitments. The call was with a new client referral. A woman named Janet Breckenridge who ran a mid-sized infrastructure fund out of Calgary and had been given Vivienne's name by 2 separate people in the same week. Both of them said you were the most precise thinker they'd worked with, Janet said. One of them said you had the kind of clarity that made other people realize they'd been guessing. Vivienne wrote nothing down. She was listening. They talked for 40 minutes. By the end, Janet had asked if Vivienne could take on the fund as a long-term client. She had said she was prepared to offer a retainer. After the call, Vivienne sat for a minute at her desk. Through the window of her new office, a modest space on Adelaide Street, 2 rooms and a view of the rooftops, a place she had signed the lease on with her own name and her own credit, and her own quiet sense of occasion. The city was going about its afternoon business. She thought about Corbin, as she still did sometimes, not with longing, but with the particular sadness of someone who had genuinely loved a person, and watched that love become something neither of them recognized. She had not built Voss Advisory Group to prove anything to him. She had been clear about this in her own mind from the beginning, back when she had filed the business registration alone on a Thursday afternoon in her home office, while Corbin was at a dinner in North York, being described by someone as a self-made man. She had built it because she was tired of editing herself to fit beside him. Because she was tired of watching her own ideas, returned to her refurbished and attributed to someone else. Because the version of herself she was inside her work was too complete and too real to keep shutting into a smaller space at the end of every working day. She had not told him, not as strategy, not as revenge. She simply had not found a moment when she believed he would truly hear it, and after a while she had stopped trying to find that moment, and after a while longer she had understood what that meant. The office was quiet. Outside the light was changing, that particular late afternoon gold that came through the west-facing windows in October, the month she had first met him, the month she had finally left. She opened the new client file. She picked up her pen and she began. A year after that Wednesday afternoon, Vivienne Hale was invited to give the keynote at a financial risk symposium in Vancouver. She accepted. She wrote the speech herself in long form, at the kitchen table of the house she had bought in the annex. A semi-detached on a quiet street with maple trees and good light and a back garden. She was learning, slowly, to use. The symposium was held in a hotel ballroom overlooking the water. 300 people in the room. She stood at the podium in a dark blue dress she had bought for herself and worn for no one but herself and walked to the microphone. Corbin was in the room. She saw him near the back, slightly to the left, in a navy blazer. She had been told he would be there. He was attending a development conference in the same hotel, different floors, and someone had apparently told someone and it had made its way to her the day before. She had not changed her decision to come. She looked at him for 1 second. He looked back. Neither of them moved. Then she turned to the room. She spoke for 35 minutes about risk modeling in legacy contamination cases, about the errors embedded in optimistic regulatory assumptions, about a methodology she had been refining for 6 years that was now being adopted by 3 firms, whose names she did not need to mention because everyone in the room already knew them. She spoke in her own voice. She did not perform certainty she didn't have. She did not soften the parts that were complex. She did not wait for anyone to invite her to finish a thought. When she was done, the room applauded. Not the polite applause of an audience that has sat through something adequate, the real kind. The kind that starts before people quite mean to start. She thanked them. She left the stage. In the hallway outside the ballroom, a young woman in her late 20s stopped her. She was holding a notebook. "I just want to say," she started, then collected herself. "I've been trying to get people to listen to that methodology for 2 years. I've been told it was too conservative, too cautious, too much, and you just..." She stopped again. "Thank you." Vivienne looked at her for a moment. She recognized something in the woman's face. The specific expression of someone who has been made to feel that what they know is less than it is. "Don't let them make it smaller," Vivienne said. "Whatever you have figured out, don't let anyone make it smaller, including you." The woman nodded. Her eyes were bright. Vivienne walked back toward the elevators. In the hallway mirror she passed she looked like herself, not the woman from the gala in the green dress, not the wife, not the support structure. Just herself in a blue dress in a city that did not know the history of how she had arrived here and did not need to. Corbin found her near the elevator bank. She had known he might. That was exceptional, he said. His voice was careful. Not performative, he meant it. Thank you. He looked at her for a moment. I had no idea the methodology had gone that far. The adoption rate, it's been 6 years of work, she said. He nodded. He understood what that meant. She could see that he understood. Vivienne. He stopped. I'm sorry. I know I've said it. I know it doesn't change anything. I need you to know that I see it now. What I did, what I missed, what I took. She looked at him. 16 years of knowing him were in that look. The coffee and the documents and the kitchen floor and the Zurich table and the gala and the long drive home in the car and every version of both of them. The ones who had believed in each other first and the ones they had each slowly become. I know you do, she said. I believe you. Something moved in his face. But I didn't need you to see it, she said. That's the part you still don't understand. I didn't need your recognition to make it real. I needed it because I loved you, and that's not the same thing. The elevator arrived. She stepped inside. He stayed where he was. She did not tell him goodbye. There was nothing left to say that the year had not already said more clearly. The doors closed. She watched the floor numbers change. Somewhere below her, 300 people were still in a room where her name had just filled the air and held it. Her name, her work, her voice. She had not become visible by leaving him. She had always been visible. She had simply finally stopped standing in his shadow long enough to let the light find her. Be careful with the people who stay quiet beside you. Quiet is not the same as empty. Sometimes the person who asks the least for themselves is carrying the most. The one who never demands to be seen may have simply learned, over time, that the person who should be looking has already decided not to. And when they leave, not in fury but in that particular calm of someone who has finally stopped waiting, that is the moment you understand what was in the room all along.